On the edge of Tonto National Forest, where pine shadows fall across Arizona's red earth, Cole Maddox, 34 years old, mechanic for the Hells Angels Phoenix chapter, had lived alone for 9 months in the weathered wooden cabin that once belonged to his brother Ryder. Since the day Ryder died in a shootout with the cartel, Cole's world had shrunk to the sound of engines, the smell of oil, empty beer cans, and fitful sleep on the sagging couch in the garage. He rarely left the place. Mornings fixing bikes, afternoons drinking beer, evenings sitting alone watching the desert shift colors under the sunset, repeating like an old machine about to break down. The dirt road out front saw so little traffic that only the wind and sand still remembered its shape. Cole thought he had melted into the desert silence, that solitude was the only thing still loyal to him. But for the past few days, amid the wind and the rustle of dry leaves, he began to feel something strange. The cabin was no longer completely alone. In the days that followed, the familiar silence around the cabin began to change in ways that made Cole switch off the drill mid-spin just to listen. Every morning, between gusts sweeping through the pines, he heard the snap of dry branches, light but deliberate, followed by the sound of footsteps trying hard to leave no trace. Sometimes he caught a faint breath passing by, blending with the scent of pine resin like a vague warning. Then one time, while looking up from the half-finished Harley, Cole saw a tall figure standing motionless between two pine trunks, nearly 6'3", broad-shouldered, built like a statue carved straight into the forest shadow. He only managed one blink, and when he opened his eyes again, the figure was completely gone, as if it had never existed. The absolute cleanliness of the disappearance made the hairs on the back of Cole's neck stand up. He searched around the cabin and found scattered traces, soft leather boot prints unlike anything soldiers or hikers wore, and a narrow beaded cord, red, turquoise, white, in the traditional Apache and Navajo style. Cole gripped his Glock tighter, carrying it even when changing oil or lifting drums, because instinct told him whatever was closing in on the cabin was not wildlife. It was definitely human. Then one afternoon, as the sun turned orange-gold and Cole was stacking tools beside the garage door, without a sound, without warning, she stepped out of the forest. Completely open. Completely calm. She stood about 30 yards away, legs straight, shoulders relaxed, deep black eyes, looking straight at him, not threatening, not fleeing, just watching. As if she had known who he was for a long time, and now only wanted to see what he would do next. Cole was lying half under an old Harley Softail, hands black with engine grease and the familiar sharp smell of oil, when the sunlight spilling across the ground in front of the garage suddenly darkened, as if something huge was blocking it. He froze. The instincts of a Hell's Angel snapped every sense to high alert, cold as steel. Cole slid out from under the bike, still holding the wrench but already loosening his fingers to reach for the Glock on the wall shelf. But before he could fully stand, his eyes locked onto the sight that stopped his breath in his chest. She was standing right there, at the garage door, silent, as if she hadn't walked in, as if the air itself had simply made room for her without a sound. The giant Apache woman he had glimpsed days earlier among the pines. Only this time Cole could see every detail clearly. Nearly 6'3", broad-shouldered, compact and hard muscle earned from years of real combat. Thick black hair braided into one long plait that reached almost to her shoulder blades. Skin darkened by the sun. Not the tan of someone who plays outside, but the deep color of someone raised outdoors. Her face tilted slightly, deep black eyes studying him with the focus of a hunter sizing up prey, not to kill, but to decide what kind it was and whether it was worth noticing at all. What choked Cole was this. Those eyes held not 1% of fear. No worry. No weariness of the weak. No urgency like the people running from the cartel he had met before. She looked at him as if she were the one fully in control of the situation. That gaze sent a chill down Cole's spine. Not from fear, but because he could feel the power in it. Power that didn't brag, didn't try to prove anything. It simply existed in her like an extension of bone and blood. Cole stood up straight. The wrench slipped from his hand and clattered lightly on the concrete in the brittle silence. But she didn't move, didn't blink, didn't glance at the Glock, just looked at him. She wore a dark brown leather jacket, the left sleeve torn open to reveal a fresh, barely closed wound wrapped tight with rough cloth in a technique completely different from any doctor's bandage. Cole had seen that kind of wrap when he volunteered with Tribal Relief after the floods years ago. Fast, clean, precise, stops the bleeding while still allowing full, hard movement. She had done it herself. She didn't need him. And more importantly, she refused to act like she was hurt. Cole's body automatically shifted into a defensive stance, feet slightly apart for balance, right hand half a step back. The whole garage felt stretched tight like a steel cable waiting for the smallest force to snap. The only difference, neither had drawn a weapon. Cole flicked a quick glance toward the Glock, and in that instant he knew she had seen the movement. Still, she didn't react the way a normal person would. No defensive stance, no step back, no hand drifting toward a weapon. She just tilted her head a fraction, the corner of her mouth lifting in the tiniest motion that wasn't a smile, more like a warning, or like she was telling herself, if you're stupid, I'll deal with you before you finish breathing. And that was when Cole understood she wasn't just a warrior. She was so used to danger that it had become part of her presence. The Arizona wind blew through the garage carrying pine resin, hot earth, and the raw smell of tanned leather from her clothes, strong, rough, unhidden. Cole realized his hand was trembling slightly, not from fear, but because the back of his neck had the strange feeling of seeing something that shouldn't exist in an ordinary life, something both beautiful and dangerous. Between them, a few seconds of silence stretched like minutes. She studied him in a way that was deeply unsettling, meticulous, sharp, missing nothing, as if she had come here to decide whether he was the person she was looking for. She turned first, walking back toward the forest, ducking slightly under a shaft of sunlight. When only half her body was in the tree shadow, she paused. Just one beat, the pause of someone in no hurry, unafraid, but wanting to leave something behind. She spoke, voice low and calm like she was talking about the weather. You're not like the other bikers. Without looking back, without giving Cole time to ask a single question, she vanished into the forest in a few steps. No sound, no footprints, like an illusion. But Cole knew it was no hallucination. And he knew one other thing with absolute certainty. From the moment she said those words, his solitary life would never be peaceful again. After that encounter in the garage, the silence that had been Cole's companion no longer held its familiar shape. Every morning when he opened the cabin door, coffee still hot in his hand, the air barely rising off the ground, she was already there, standing on the hill or beside the sun-bleached fence, motionless like part of the landscape. She never hid, never crouched behind trees, never watched from the dark like a stalker. On the contrary, she stood tall, letting the sun hit her full on like a challenge. Here I am. I'm watching you. What are you going to do about it? Every time he met those eyes, deep black unflinching, Cole felt his heart skip a beat and then pound harder than usual, as if someone had flipped a switch on a part of him. He had buried under months of isolation, but he tried to act casual, pouring coffee, firing up the air compressor, doing everything as if a 6'3" Apache woman wasn't standing less than 100 yards away looking at him with eyes that dried his throat. She always appeared when he least expected it. The moment he stepped onto the porch, when he was dragging the old oil drum, when he was swapping spark plugs on a friend's Sportster left in his care, all he had to do was look up and there she was, on the hill, under the pines, by the rusted gate, on the boulder overlooking the cabin. Never a word. Never too close. Never too far away either. She watched him as if every move he made was a puzzle piece she needed to study. What bothered Cole most wasn't that she showed up. It was that he didn't know what answer she was looking for in him. She was quiet, but never invisible. Her presence was like a sharp blade pressed against the shell of his solitude, making tiny cracks appear. Every morning she stood like stone, chest rising and falling with the deep, even breath of someone used to high altitude, someone who could run for hours through forest without losing rhythm. When the wind moved, her black hair swayed gently, sometimes catching the sun like liquid obsidian. Cole told himself it was just defensive observation, that maybe she wanted to be sure he wasn't the kind of biker who caused trouble for native women or migrants. But deep down he knew it was more than that. There was something deeply personal, deeply human in the way she looked at him, and that unsettled Cole in a way he thought he had forgotten long ago. One morning, while carrying a toolbox out to work on an old chopper, he almost dropped it when he saw her standing at the foot of the slope, closer than ever, maybe 50 yards. She didn't speak, didn't nod, didn't signal, just stood there, watching. Another afternoon, when the sun was stretching long shadows across the red sand and the air was finally cooling, Cole heard steady footsteps on the gravel. This time she wasn't far off. She walked right past the front of the garage, only about 10 yards away, close enough for her scent, dry sage, wood smoke, sun-baked leather, to flood the space and spin his head. She didn't look directly at him as she passed. But Cole felt every inch of her movement, the kind that wasn't showy, made no noise, but carried raw power, as if each step was measured by survival itself. Cole stood in the middle of the garage, rag still in hand, chest tightening as he realized he was doing something he had sworn he would never do again, noticing another person's presence. Worse, he was starting to look forward to it. Each day she came a little closer, breaking another chunk of the space he had built to keep himself separate. Each day she left behind a scent of ancient forest and campfire that made the wooden cabin, the oily garage, and Cole's whole programmed existence feel too small, too quiet, compared to the fierce life radiating from her. Cole didn't know when he started waiting for that tall silhouette to appear on the hill, waiting for the faint sound of footsteps on red dirt, waiting for the heavy metallic silence that only she carried, waiting for eyes that were direct, sharp, and so deep they made him feel naked yet strangely at peace. And one evening, standing in front of the garage watching the sun sink behind the Mazatzal Mountains, Cole suddenly realized a truth so simple it stole his breath for a second. Her presence, simply standing there, saying nothing, touching nothing, asking for nothing, was breaking the shell of solitude he thought he would carry for the rest of his life, and the scariest part wasn't that she could do it. It was that he was letting her. 3 days after she walked past the garage, Cole decided he'd had enough, not because he was afraid, but because her steady appearances were creating an indescribable feeling in his chest, a pressure, an attraction, something like the desert heat trapped in a closed space. That morning, while taking the trash behind the cabin, he saw her tall figure again beside the small creek that ran through the property. Still the same motionless stance, same broad shoulders, same straight black hair hanging down her back like a bold ink stroke against the Arizona landscape. She stood with her back to him, watching the water catch the early sunlight. Cole knew she had heard his footsteps the instant he stepped off the porch. Someone who lived in the forest and fought for survival never missed movement. But she didn't turn, didn't greet him, didn't vanish like usual. Cole stopped a safe distance away, close enough to show he wasn't running, far enough not to seem threatening. "Why are you watching me?" he asked, voice low and steady. She didn't turn right away, just tilted her head enough for him to catch the sharp line of her cheekbone in the water's reflection. "If I wanted to hurt you," she said, voice even, unhurried, direct, "I would have already." "That's not what I asked." This time she turned fully around. Her black eyes met his gray ones like two blades touching, a thin, cold, metallic moment. At this distance Cole realized she was slightly taller than him. It was the first time in years he had stood in front of a woman whose presence forced a Hell's Angel like him to keep his breathing steady. "My name is Ayanna Nez," she said, voice level, every syllable clear, like someone who learned English somewhere without extra words. "Navajo. Apache." Cole nodded slowly, as if memorizing every letter of her name. "I'm Cole, I know." That answer caught him off guard. "You know, I don't follow the wrong person." Ayanna folded her arms across her chest, not defensive, just assessing. "I've been watching you to see if you're the kind of biker I need to watch out for." Cole stood silent for a long second, unsure whether to laugh, get angry, or admit she had just said exactly what he had felt in her eyes these past days. In the end he only asked, and Ayanna didn't answer right away. She studied him, as if the answer depended on the smallest twitch on his face. Then she said, very slowly, very real, "I don't know yet." Wind rippled the creek, tiny bubbles shook on the surface. A leaf fell, spun in the shallow current, and drifted away. Cole looked straight at her, no dodging. "What kind do you think I am?" he asked. "I'm trying to find out." "For what reason?" Ayanna shifted one silent step closer, light as a shadow. "There are many kinds of people in these woods. Good bikers, bad bikers. Bikers who lie to get what they want." A faint flash of disgust crossed her eyes, maybe aimed at someone in her past. Cole didn't know yet. Bikers who hurt Native women, and bikers who died trying to protect them. Cole raised an eyebrow. "So where do I fall on that list?" "Like I said," she answered. "I don't know yet." Silence returned, but this time it wasn't the silence of threat or suspicion. It felt like a challenge, an invisible line they both stood on opposite sides of, waiting to see who would step across first. Cole drew a slow breath, tasting creek water and hot earth. "What if I say I'm not the kind you need to worry about?" "I don't trust words," Ayanna replied instantly. "I only trust actions." Cole nodded, tilting his head slightly. "Fair." Ayanna looked at him so long, Cole felt she was seeing straight through his skin to whatever was underneath. I know you're a Hell's Angel, she added. Cole didn't blink. So I have to be even more careful. Cole let out a short, tense laugh. Not mocking, just the kind that escapes when someone too wound up hears something brutally honest. You've got a thing against bikers. No. She looked at him like he had just said the dumbest thing all day. I have experience with bikers. That landed heavy as stone hitting the creek bottom. In that moment, Cole understood whatever came next wouldn't be a simple story of two strangers becoming allies. Ayanna Nez carried a history of blood, choices, survival. She wasn't the kind of woman who came to soften his life. She was the kind who came to test whether he deserved to exist in her world at all. And for some reason Cole couldn't explain, that didn't annoy him. On the contrary, it made him want to pass the test. Ayanna said nothing more. She simply turned, took a few steps, then paused just long enough for Cole to feel the conversation wasn't over. She didn't look back, but her voice carried clear, cold, and clean like an axe splitting wood. Tomorrow I'll watch you again. Don't disappoint me. Then she vanished into the forest like a spirit of the high desert, leaving Cole standing by the creek, letting out a long breath he hadn't realized he was holding. And for the first time in months, Cole felt his heart beating for something unrelated to the past. Not because of Ryder's memory, not because of grief, but because of an Apache woman who had just walked into his life like a night storm ripping through a canyon. Cole saw her again the next morning, not at the creek, but right in front of the sun-bleached wooden fence where desert met forest. She stood as if she had been waiting a long time, arms still folded, face calm but eyes deeper than yesterday, as if she had prepared to say something that would only ever be said once. Cole walked up, keeping a respectful distance, close enough not to seem weak, far enough not to seem aggressive. They stood in silence for a few seconds while dry wind whipped through the pine tops like a distant warning. You want to know why I've been watching you? Ayanna said, voice low but clear, no trace of unease. Cole just nodded. She dropped her arms, and in that motion Cole caught a flash of exhaustion, not physical, but the kind that belongs only to people who have run too long, fought too much, lost too many things that can't be taken back. I'm hiding, she said, short and direct. No beating around the bush. Cole didn't interrupt. Wind shifted, carrying pine resin and hot sand. From who? He asked. From Red Talons, she answered, eyes never leaving his. An extremist group inside the reservation. Cole frowned. He had heard of the Red Talons, an organization that looked like a cultural protection group on the outside, but had twisted into a semi-armed militia. What kind of extremist? Ayanna drew a long breath, like pulling up memories she didn't want to face but had to tell. The kind that mixes tradition, violence, and the power of men who think they have the right to rule women. The kind who believe native women must obey, stay silent, and belong to someone. Cole felt heat prick the back of his neck. And you? Ayanna looked him dead in the eye. I was chosen to belong to the new leader. For a second Cole thought he had misheard. But no, her face held no exaggeration. Not a single tremor, just raw desert truth. Chosen, Cole repeated, voice low and dark. Yes, without asking me, without needing my agreement. They thought it was an honor, a tradition that must continue. She gave a humorless smile. I saw it as chains. She continued, voice cooling. When I refused, they called it an insult to leadership, to tradition. They said I had forgotten my place. Cole felt his hands curl into fists without realizing it. Then what? Then I helped a few girls much younger than me escape. Girls who didn't want to be married off. Girls who were beaten. Girls locked in cabins to prepare. I opened doors, got them out in the night, gave them bus money. Ayanna lifted her chin, eyes flashing with a fire sharp as heated steel. That was the night they branded me a traitor. She glanced down at her left arm where the bandage showed beneath the leather. And the first night they started hunting me. Those words, they're hunting me, hung in the air like a cold blade. Cole had seen people hunted by cartels or rival gangs. He knew the look in the eyes of someone who had survived that kind of chase. He was looking at it now in Ayanna. How long? Cole asked quietly. 6 months, she said. 6 months running. 6 months sleeping with cold stone. Eating whatever I could find. 6 months trusting no one but myself. Cole breathed slow to keep his voice steady. The wound? A gift from the Red Talons 3 days ago, she answered lightly. Like talking about the weather, they got too close. I had to cut through thick brush to lose them. And you watched me because you thought I might be one of them? No, she said immediately. I watched you because your cabin is the only place around here that doesn't belong to them. But I didn't know what kind of biker you were. She looked straight at Cole again, black eyes deep as night water. I've met good bikers, and I've met bikers so bad I wanted to shoot them from a distance. Cole swallowed hard. Ayanna continued, voice softer now, showing a rare sliver of raw honesty. I watched you to find out whether you're the kind who would sell me out for a little gain, or walk away if the red talons showed up. Cole remembered all those mornings she stood on the hill, judging him. And what did you decide? She was quiet a long time, then answered in a voice not loud but solid as nails in wood. I still don't know, but I need to. The wind picked up. Sand swirled in thin curtains around their boots. Cole looked at the woman in front of him, the one he had thought was just a strange shadow in the woods, and the truth hit him like a punch. She wasn't a shadow. She wasn't a stalker. She wasn't someone passing through. She was a warrior running from violence. Someone hunted not for crimes, but for saving those weaker than herself. Someone carrying both strength and pain from a life most Americans would never understand. And all of that, everything about her forced Cole to accept this meeting was no longer just about forest and cabin. It had just become about two people carrying past heavy as red-hot steel. Ayanna looked at him one last time, then turned and walked into the trees. But before her shape melted into the pines, she said softly, just loud enough for Cole to hear, and I hope you're not the bad kind. The next noon, when the Arizona sun poured knife-sharp light over the cabin, Cole was standing on the porch wiping sweat from his brow when heavy, steady footsteps sounded on the dirt out front. He didn't need to look to know it was her. No one else in this area moved like that woman, light as the forest, strong as the mountains, straight as an arrow flying true. Ayanna stepped onto the porch and faced him. No safe distance, no asking permission, no warning. Her face wasn't cold like usual, but it wasn't soft either. It was in a strange state, the tension of someone about to say something they weren't sure they should. She looked Cole dead in the eye, and before he could ask anything, said in a low, deliberate voice, each word carved into wood, I haven't had sex in 6 months. Cole froze solid. Time slipped out of its flow for a few seconds. The heat rising off the rocks made the air shimmer like a mirage, but he knew he hadn't misheard. Ayanna went on, voice still calm but rough underneath like stone worn down too long. 6 months living only on adrenaline and anger. 6 months surviving on memories and hate. 6 months letting no one touch me, because every touch was a threat. Cole had to swallow hard to keep his breath from bursting out. He felt like he was standing in front of a cornered wild animal, not weakened, but one that had fought so much it no longer feared anything except its own heart. Ayanna spoke again, slower, deeper, each word dropping between them and creating a new unfamiliar space Cole wasn't sure he should step into. I'm not saying this for pity. I don't need pity. I've survived fine, and I'll keep surviving. Cole gave a small nod, not trusting himself to speak right. Ayanna took one step closer. Her shadow blocked most of the sunlight in front of him, making it feel like the whole desert had shrunk to the exact distance between them. She continued. But, for the first time he heard hesitation in her voice. Not fear, but the pause before saying something that could change everything about how he saw her. She drew a deep breath. Her powerful shoulders rose and fell. But looking at you, her eyes locked on his. Not the usual assessing stare, but one that carried weight, meaning truth. Looking at you, I remember I once had a heart. Cole felt the air squeeze out of his lungs. That wasn't flirting, wasn't a promise, wasn't the line of someone looking for affection. It was the cautious confession of a person who had left herself behind in war, running from violence, living more on instinct than hope. Someone slowly realizing that a part of her, the human part, the soft part, the part that could trust and choose, was trying to come back. Cole didn't know how to stand, how to breathe. He had never heard anyone say things like that without shaking. Ayanna didn't shake at all. She stood straight, chin slightly raised, as if declaring it was the bravest thing she had done in 6 months. I didn't come here just to hide, she said, voice low like a drumbeat at the foot of a mountain. If I only wanted to hide, I would have gone another direction, never stopped, never stepped out of the trees so you could see my face. Cole felt his heart pound harder with every passing second. She took another half step closer. I came here, she said, because I want to know why you're not like the bikers I have to watch out for. Cole opened his mouth but no sound came. Ayanna tilted her head. eyes sharp as a freshly honed blade. "And I want to know why when I stand next to you. I'm not afraid." Afraid. The word sounded foreign, because it didn't fit the woman standing in front of him, the woman who could kill a man barehanded if she wanted. But Ayanna looked at him like she was talking about a different kind of fear, the kind that belongs to someone who had locked their heart so long and so tight they forgot what opening the door felt like. Cole drew a deep breath, trying to steady his voice, but it still came out rough. "I don't know what to say." "Good," Ayanna answered. "Don't say anything. Just listen." She looked deep into his eyes. For so long Cole wanted to step back but didn't. "You woke something in me. Not just physical desire, though it has been 6 months. One eyebrow lifted slightly, testing his reaction. Cole swallowed again. "But something else," she continued. "Something I thought was dead." The hot desert wind moved through, stirring her hair like black bird wings against the blazing sky. She spoke the final sentence slowly, hiding nothing, defending nothing. "I came here because I want to know if that thing is worth keeping." And in that moment, when their breaths mingled, when her truth fell at his feet like a wordless invitation, Cole understood she was no longer in his life as someone on the run. She had come for something else. Bigger, more dangerous, more real, the desire to be human again. And maybe, just maybe, that started with him, that same afternoon. When the sun was slanting, and the cabin's shadow stretched like a cut across the red earth, Cole was checking a spark plug wire when the sound of an unfamiliar engine came up the dirt track from the forest. It wasn't a Harley, wasn't a lost tourist. It was the loud, raspy growl of an old pickup, the kind used on reservations, modified for rock, sand, and hauling a lot of people. Cole dropped his tools, stepped out of the garage, and saw a plume of gold dust rising in the distance. Then a matte black Chevy Silverado stopped about 50 yards from the cabin. Dust settled, revealing 3 men climbing out. And Cole knew instantly. Red Talons. He recognized them not by their clothes. Everyone wore leather jackets, canvas pants, heavy boots. But by the red beaded cords tied around their left upper arms, the mark of the extremist group Ayanna had described. Each carried a weapon. One held a sawed-off shotgun. One had a pistol on his hip. The last wore a long traditional knife. They weren't hurried. Didn't run. Didn't look around. They walked straight toward the cabin like they had been sent to the exact address. Cole stood motionless at the door, feet apart, shoulders tense, right hand near his hip but not drawing the Glock. He knew drawing now would be suicide. The 3 moved with the confidence of men used to intimidation. Cole figured they had tracked Ayanna long enough to know she was hiding in this area, and now they had come to take her back. The cabin door opened behind him just as the 3 Red Talons stopped at shotgun range. Ayanna stepped out, no longer hiding. She moved to Cole's right, not behind him, not cowering, but shoulder to shoulder, equal. But her eyes when they landed on the 3 men were completely different. No longer calm, no longer cold, but a barely contained fury glowing like hot coals. The one in front stepped forward, a Navajo man around 40, long hair tied back, small cold eyes like knife blades. He spoke first in their language, like spitting in her face, then switched to English so Cole would hear every word. "Ayanna Nez, you're coming with us. No question. Just command." Ayanna didn't answer. She stood straight, shoulders square, hands loose at her sides but ready. The second man spat on the ground. "You've run enough. Time to come home." The third flicked open his knife. The sharp click cut through the hot air. He tipped the blade toward Cole. "And don't let this biker stick his nose in tribal business." Cole took half a step forward on pure instinct, putting himself between them and Ayanna. "She's not going anywhere with you." All 3 turned their eyes on him at once. The shotgun guy narrowed his, "None of your business, biker." Cole didn't back down. His body settled into the stance of someone who had faced threats too many times. "She's not property for you to come here and order around." The knife guy gave a humorless laugh. "She belongs to the Red Talons, not to you." Ayanna spoke for the first time. Her voice cut like a spear sharpened on flint. "I don't belong to anyone." He narrowed his eyes. "You don't get to decide." "I do," she said. "And I decide I'm not going back." The tension dropped another level. The shotgun guy lifted his weapon half an inch, not enough to fire, but enough to threaten. Cole spread his arm slightly, shielding part of Ayanna on instinct. The knife man laughed again. "Look at this, biker playing hero." What he didn't understand was Cole wasn't playing anything. He was standing on the same protective instinct he had once seen Ryder use to shield him from the cartel years ago. Cole knew he was outnumbered, outgunned, on their territory. But he also knew he wasn't backing down, not in front of her. Not after what she had told him. Words even the strongest man would struggle to say. The shotgun guy aimed straight at Cole again. "Step aside. This is Red Talon's business, not biker business." Cole stared down the barrel, heart pounding but voice strangely calm. "You want her? You go through me." The desert wind flipped a few dry leaves. That was the moment Cole thought he was about to die. But before death could arrive, Ayanna placed a hand on his shoulder. Not hard, but enough for him to understand. She stepped forward, standingly beside him, not hiding behind him, not using him as a shield. She said low, only for him, voice rough but firm, "If you stay here, they'll shoot you first." Cole turned his head. His eyes said he didn't care, but she shook her head, looking deep into him, with an expression he had never seen on her, something very close to apology. "I can handle myself," she said. "Don't die for me." Then she stepped forward, putting herself center stage for the 3 red talons. She raised both hands, not surrender, but terms. "I'll go, but only because I choose to." The leader narrowed his eyes, but finally lowered the shotgun. "About time." He threw Cole a contemptuous look. "You should thank Ayanna for saving your life." Cole wanted to charge, grab his collar, smash his face for that tone. But Ayanna glanced back over her shoulder, one look that lasted less than a heartbeat, but carried a message loud as thunder. "Don't." She climbed into the truck bed on her own. No shoving, no binding. The 3 red talons got in. The Silverado roared to life, tires spinning in the sand. But a few yards down the track, Ayanna turned her head. That look lasted less than a second. No words, no gesture, no specific promise, but Cole saw everything in it. "I'll be back. Don't leave. Don't think I chose death." Then the truck sped off, trailing red Arizona dust, leaving Cole standing alone in the yard, fists clenched so tight his knuckles went white, heart pounding like an engine that hadn't been started in months. That night, a rare cold Arizona wind whistled through the cabin's wooden gaps, carrying the smell of dry dust and rustling leaves across hard ground. Cole sat alone in the garage, arm draped over the Softail's tank, staring into the darkness at the end of the yard, where the Silverado had disappeared hours earlier. He couldn't focus on anything since Ayanna was taken. His hands shook slightly every time he remembered her last look. No fear, no surrender, just a message. "Don't interfere. Let me handle it." But the unease in his chest wouldn't quiet. It wasn't fear she would die. Ayanna wasn't the kind who died easily. It was fear he would never see her again. Cole cracked his 4th beer, when 3 soft knocks sounded at the cabin door. Measured, precise, loud enough to hear, but not loud enough to disturb the forest behind. Cole froze. Nobody around here knocked like that. No biker, no neighbor, nobody within 20 miles used that signal. Only one person. Cole set the beer down, hand moving toward the Glock but not drawing, only one possibility in his head. He walked out into the yard. Thin moonlight spilled over the porch steps like spilled silver. He opened the door, and there she stood. Ayanna Nez, right cheekbone bruised purple, lip crusted with dried blood, hair wild from running, leather jacket torn longer at the left shoulder, breathing hard and heavy like she had sprinted over a mile through forest. Cole didn't remember breathing in that moment. He only remembered lunging to catch her before his brain caught up. Ayanna used her good hand to push gently against his chest, not rejecting help, just keeping him from panicking. "I got away," she panted, voice hoarse. "But this time they meant to kill me, not capture." Cole ground his teeth. He had known it was coming, but hearing it from her mouth twisted his guts like pulled chain. "How many?" he asked, voice dropped low. 3, maybe 4. They split up, didn't want me heading south. She glanced quickly toward the forest like she could feel shadows moving. "They're tracking me. They'll come." Cole slid an arm around her waist to guide her inside, but Ayanna shook her head hard. "No, if they come here, you die." "I'm not, no choice," she cut in, voice sharp as a blade. "I won't let you die for me." Cole gripped her shoulders, pulled her close, eyes locked on hers so she knew he wasn't bullshitting. "Then we both get out." Ayanna hesitated half a second. Only half, then she nodded. Cole pulled her toward the garage, moving fast but silent. He shoved the oil-stained rug aside, revealing a small steel hatch in the floor, an old maintenance pit he and Ryder had used to hide stuff when the cartel was hunting them years ago. "Down," Cole said, flipping the hatch open. No waiting for argument. Ayanna didn't argue. She climbed down one-handed, the other clutching her left side where Cole now saw blood soaking through the leather. Cole followed, pulling the hatch shut. Darkness swallowed them like a closing cliff. The pit was only about 6 feet high, enough to stand but cramped, roughly 10 feet across. It held old toolboxes, oil drums, coils of wire, and Ryder's leftover leather jacket. The air was thick with the smell of oil, hot metal, and earth. Alayana leaned against the wall, breathing hard once, the sound echoing softly in the small space. Cole clicked on the tiny flashlight taped to the wall. Weak yellow light fell across her bruised cheek. Up close like this, Alayana no longer looked like the invincible warrior who had stood on the porch at noon. She looked like someone who had gone too far, run too fast, fought too much, but was still standing on pure will. Cole put a hand on her shoulder, voice low, "You're hurt." Alayana shook her head, their breaths mingled inches apart. "Doesn't matter, it matters to me." She didn't answer right away, just looked at him. The look shrank the whole space, tangled their breathing together. Cole realized his chest was rising and falling faster than normal, not from fear, but because she was too close, too real, too alive. Above them an engine sounded, not loud, but clear. One truck, then a door slammed, then boots on dry ground. Alayana held her breath, shoulders rigid as a drawn bow. Cole put a finger to her lips, quiet, dark, cold. The smell of oil and her breath stretched every sense to the limit. 3 sets of footsteps. A man's voice, distant but audible. "Check the garage." Alayana shifted instinctively closer, pressing into Cole to make herself smaller. Only inches separated them now. Boots entered the garage. Close. Very close. Cole felt Alayana's breath on his neck. Hot, trembling slightly. Not from fear but from adrenaline flooding her veins. He thought if they got any closer he would hear her heart. Dust sifted down from the ceiling as someone stepped right on the hatch. Cole wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her even tighter, not macho instinct, but to keep her from bolting on fighter reflex, and to keep himself steady. A metallic clatter overhead. Someone kicked a toolbox. Boots circled. Another voice. Nothing. Maybe she went east. Then engines started. Tires spun hard in the sand. One truck left. Then the second. Then silence. Silence so thick Cole could hear his own heart. Ayanna let out a slow breath. Her forehead brushed his chest for just a moment, long enough to send heat through his whole body in a way he couldn't explain. She looked up at him, face only inches away, black eyes catching a glint of something unreadable in the dark. "You saved me," she whispered, voice rough from running and something else. Cole said nothing. He didn't trust his voice, but his hand on her waist tightened, not accidental, not rational. Just the shortest answer in the world. Down there in the dark garage pit, amid the smell of oil and mingled breath, they stood so close every other distance in their lives suddenly meant nothing. And Cole knew from this moment on, nothing would be simple again. The silence in the pit grew heavier, as if the darkness itself was adding weight to every breath. Cole still held Ayanna close so she wouldn't bump sharp metal edges, and because overhead the sounds kept coming. Heavy male footsteps like hammer blows, furniture crashing, doors kicked open instead of turned. The red talons had entered the cabin. They were tearing it apart. Cole heard wood splintering, glass shattering on tile, men's voices rising and falling, thick with rage. They weren't looking to capture Ayanna anymore. They were looking to end her. Ayanna stood pressed to Cole's chest. He could feel every deep, short breath she took, strong but trembling slightly, not trembling from fear of death. Cole knew that too well. This woman had stared death down closer than he ever had, and if it walked into the garage right now, she would meet it with everything she had. No, the tremble came from somewhere else. It came from the inches left between them, from the first time in months she had allowed anyone close enough to feel her breath touch theirs. Footsteps stopped right above the hatch. Cole's grip on her waist tightened reflexively, pushing her deeper into shadow. Ayanna placed her palm flat on his chest, right over his heart. The pressure was light, but Cole felt it spread through his rib cage like current. He held his breath. She did too. Up top, one of the red talons kicked the hatch hard. The metallic shudder rang down into their ears in sharp echoes. Ayanna squeezed her eyes shut for a fraction of a second, jaw clenched. She was in pain. Cole knew it, but she didn't make a sound, only held her breath, only kept her hand on his heart, like she was keeping him steady. Footsteps moved away. A low shout, then another voice. "Nothing down there. Check the bedroom." Footsteps faded. Engine started. One truck left first, then the second. But Cole still didn't open the hatch. He waited. 1 minute. 2. Ayanna didn't urge him. She stayed pressed to his chest, their breath mixing in the suffocating space. When Cole finally relaxed his body, no longer strung like a breaking cable, Ayanna opened her eyes. Those black eyes looked at him under the weak flashlight glow that barely lit her bruised cheek, but her gaze didn't need light to cut. She spoke in a low, hoarse voice so honest it sliced his heart. "You make me remember I'm still alive." Nothing in life had prepared Cole for that sentence. No fight, no painful memory, no punch he had ever taken, no words from Ryder, nothing left in the old cabin. Ayanna, he said her name, but didn't know what came after. Maybe he wanted to say he wasn't worth hoping in. Maybe that he wasn't the good man she thought. Maybe that he was just a biker trying to stay upright in his own loneliness. But no words left his lips because she lifted her hand. One motion, very slow, very gentle. Her fingertips touched his jaw like she was confirming he was real, not a dream. "Don't talk," she whispered, breath brushing his lips, voice softer than he ever thought her voice could be. "Just be here." Cole closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, and when he opened them, their lips met. The kiss wasn't pretty or perfect. It wasn't like kisses in those biker movies people make for fun. It was rough, full of tension, full of held breath, full of desire pent up 6 months in her and 9 months in him. It was like two people dying of thirst in the desert, finding one mouthful of water, not just to survive, but to remember what being alive felt like. Ayanna gripped the back of his neck, pulling him closer like she needed proof he wouldn't vanish again. Cole slid his hand up her back, feeling her heat through the torn leather. The kiss deepened, harder, longer. No space left, no fear left. Just ragged breathing, fabric scraping, hearts pounding so loud Cole heard them in his ears. Above them, the cabin was being destroyed, furniture thrown, boots stamping across wood. But down in the pit, in a space barely big enough for two people pressed together, the world shrank to one thing. They had just found each other in the darkest circumstances. Ayanna broke the kiss for a second, forehead against his, breath still mingling, voice barely wind. "I thought I was already dead, Cole, but you." She swallowed lightly, eyes closing as his breath crossed her cheek. "You make me remember I still have something worth keeping," Cole answered with a gentle squeeze at her waist. No words, but enough for her to know he wasn't letting her carry the weight alone. Not anymore. Not since the moment she knocked on his cabin door in the night. They kissed again, slower, deeper, like they were relearning their own rhythm through each other's. This kiss held no desperation of the first. It held surrender, not to enemies, but to real feeling. Cole couldn't remember who moved first. He only remembered his hand sliding up the curve behind her shoulder blade, her hand running down his back, pulling him into her darkness and breath. And then everything softened, not in the physical sense, but in the sense that two people who had built walls suddenly tore them down at the same time. That night, in the maintenance pit lit only by a dying flashlight, they were no longer fugitive and rescuer, no longer biker and warrior, no longer any boundary between two people who had lived on separate pain. They became each other's not in ownership, but in the way two heavy souls finally found a place to set their burdens down. The darkness wrapped them like an old desert blanket, and outside the night wind still blew, but something in the night had changed. They were no longer standing alone. All night, after every sound above had died, Cole and Ayanna stayed in the maintenance pit until they were certain the red talons had left the area. When they finally climbed out, the cabin looked like a battlefield. Doors kicked off their hinges, windows shattered, the mattress flipped, drawers dumped, belongings scattered across the floor. Cole stared at the wreckage, and the old feeling slammed into his chest like a fist. Memories of Ryder collapsing on the floor amid screams. Memories of the cartel tearing apart the trailer years ago. But this time he wasn't alone. Ayanna stood right beside him, breathing still ragged, yet her black eyes glowed like hot coals in the cabin's darkness. She didn't tremble, didn't look away, didn't hide fear behind toughness. She just stood next to him, as if that was the only place she still believed was safe. But that safety didn't last long. Before the sun had fully cleared the horizon, another sound ripped through the fragile quiet. Engines, not one, not two, a whole string of them. Uneven roars, pickups, old SUVs, ATVs. Cole snapped upright, eyes fixed on the distant tree line. Ayanna heard it too. She tightened the strap of the knife on her thigh, gaze sharp as a spear point. "They're back," she said, voice low and solid as earth growling. Cole stepped back into the garage, killed every light. then stood at the threshold listening as the engines grew closer. More than any time before, a wall of red dust rose from the dirt road. Moments later, white headlight beams sliced through the pines and fell on the cabin like spotlights on a target marked long ago. Cole counted at least 3 pickups, 2 SUVs, 1 ATV, 12 red Talons, all armed, all climbing out at once, headlights throwing long sword-like shadows across the ground. And this time, they hadn't come to talk. They had come to finish it. One pointed at the cabin. "Bring her out." His voice rang out like stone crashing down a cliff. Ayanna moved behind Cole to see better, but Cole raised a hand to stop her, not to shield her from danger, but because he didn't want her silhouette painted clear by those lights. "They outnumber us," Cole said quietly. "Numbers don't matter," Ayanna answered. "They have no reason, only violence." Cole stepped fully into the yard, planting himself on ground still warm from the night. The headlights blinded him, stinging his eyes, but he didn't lower his gaze. He stood tall, feet apart, hands loose at his sides but ready. 2 red Talons walked forward, rifles slung over shoulders, carrying the arrogant confidence of men who believed strength equaled ownership. "Biker," one shouted. "Send Ayanna Nez out." Cole let the silence stretch one extra beat, until even the red Talons shifted uncomfortably. Then he spoke, voice deep and carrying across the cold yard. "She's free. You want in. You come through my body." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. A few laughed shortly, a few narrowed their eyes, and the leader, the same one with the shotgun yesterday, looked at Cole like he was a stray dog blocking the road. "You've got guts, Biker," he said, taking another step, shotgun still slung but ready to swing into his hands in half a second. "But you don't understand. That girl belongs to us. She broke the rules. She betrayed the tribe. She pays." Ayanna was now on the porch steps right behind Cole, her shadow stretching huge and strong across the dirt, no longer intending to hide behind anyone. But Cole still blocked her completely. "She belongs to no one," Cole said, every word clear. "She chose freedom. You don't get to take that back." The shotgun leader frowned, glanced at his men, then raised his voice so they all heard. "This guy's pussy whipped." Another sneered, "Kill him first, then drag the woman back." The instant those words left his mouth, Ayanna's fingers dug hard into the back of Cole's cut, gripping the leather like she was afraid he'd charge and get himself killed. Cole felt the pressure small, but it hit him like a second heartbeat. That grip wasn't because she feared death, it was because she feared he'd die for her. "Cole," she said low, urgent and sharp, "standing here is suicide." "I know," Cole answered without turning, "but I also know one other thing. I'm not stepping aside." One red Talon raised his rifle, not to shoot yet, just to threaten. Cole didn't flinch. The man took another step, now only 10 yards away. Ayanna separated from Cole, stepping half a pace forward like she wanted to stand beside him, not let him carry it all. "I'll go," she said, slow and decisive, "if that stops you from killing him." Cole whipped around, eyes blazing. "No," but she raised a hand, demanding silence. "You saved me. Now let me save you." Those words froze Cole's blood. "You're not the one who sacrifices," he said through clenched teeth. Ayanna looked straight at him, black eyes unblinking, whole body taut as a drawn bowstring. "Cole, I've fought alone my whole life. I won't let anyone die for me." Up above, the red Talons began advancing in a spreading line, headlights sweeping the yard, shadows stretching like wolf fangs closing on prey. They were done threatening. They wanted it over, and then everything changed because of one single sound. Not a gunshot, not a shout, just the ground shaking. At first faint, like muffled thunder trapped underground. Then louder, then loud enough that dry leaves on the ground trembled. Cole recognized it before anyone else. Not by volume, but because he had lived his whole life hearing it. Harleys. A lot of them. The entire yard suddenly shook like a beast charging across the earth. Red Talon's headlights lit up behind Cole and Ayanna, and they saw single points of light appear among the trees like red night eyes. Ayanna gripped Cole's cut tighter as she realized the story had just turned a new, bigger, more dangerous page, and for the first time she wasn't standing alone. The ground rumble grew, like a giant beast waking somewhere deep in the canyon. At first just a distant thud, then a rapid, steady, heavy drumbeat of war. The red Talons started turning toward the sound, their black shadows stretching and swaying in the cabin headlights. Cole stood still, shoulders heavy but heart beating in perfect time with the rhythm he knew. Rhythm he'd heard on desert runs with Ryder, the thunder of a formation no one wanted to stand in front of. "Cole, what is that?" Ayanna asked. Hot breath on the back of his neck, voice not shaking, just alert. He answered without taking his eyes off the moving darkness. "My brothers." Ayanna looked at him, black eyes widening, not from fear, but because for the first time in 6 months she saw a force coming for her, not against her. Cole hadn't pulled out a phone, hadn't sent a text. He had simply raised his left wrist, where a small black leather band held an old metal device only old-school Hells Angels Phoenix chapter members carried. One press, one signal, one call, no explanation needed, no words. Brotherhood didn't need writing, just a single pulse, and they came. From the dark forest, the first Harleys appeared, headlights tearing the night, engines echoing off canyon walls like ancient Apache drums fused with modern steel thunder. 3 broke the tree line first, then 7, then 10, then an endless line. Hells Angels Phoenix chapter, followed by Tucson chapter, and at the tail heavier black Harleys, Vegas chapter. In under 5 minutes the yard blazed with Harley headlights from every direction, red, white, gold mixing, falling across the stunned faces of the red talons. The roar of over 80 Harley-Davidsons idling together made the air vibrate like heat waves. Desert dust rose in thin clouds under the beams. Bikers in death head cuts tilted their heads, headlights aimed straight at the armed red talons. Phoenix chapter stopped first, forming an arc shielding Cole and Ayanna. Jackson Iron Horse Vale, president of Phoenix chapter, killed his engine, put a boot down slow, and the whole space seemed forced to hush with the motion. The big Cherokee, Irish man with long hair spilling over his cut, walked between the 2 lines like he was entering a church. He looked at Cole, one nod. Cole returned it. No words, none needed. Jackson turned his gaze on the red talons, a look that could freeze the guilty solid. "This land isn't yours," Jackson said, voice low and rolling like stone in a canyon. "And that woman isn't yours." The red talon's leader forced a smirk, trying to stay calm, but his voice cracked slightly. "This is tribal business. Bikers have no right to interfere." Jackson threw his head back and laughed, short, heavy. "No, this is brotherhood business, and you just trespassed on one of ours." He pointed at Cole, then at Ayanna, with a tattooed wing finger. "That's who we protect." The entire biker line dropped kickstands in perfect unison, metal clanging loud against the ground, mixing with the low growl of engines still running. Over 80 pairs of eyes, men who had lived through wars, prisons, shootouts, and hundreds of miles of death road, locked on the red talons like wolves staring down strays. The red talons wavered. A few grips loosened on rifles. The shotgun guy glanced at his crew, trying to look solid, but his hand trembled like a man on a cliff edge. Jackson took one more step, voice turning to steel. "You came onto our ground, threatened our family, brought guns and violence here." He raised one finger toward Ayanna's shadow behind Cole. "She doesn't belong to you. She's free, and she stands with us." The leader ground his teeth. "She's a traitor." Ayanna stepped forward, half a step behind Cole, voice ringing strong without shouting, "I refuse to be property. If that's treason, I'll betray again." A low rumble of approval rolled from the bikers behind Jackson. A Tucson chapter brother yelled, "Hear that? She ain't going nowhere." A Vegas brother roared, "You want to fight? Fight us." Over 80 engines revved hard at once, thunder exploding across the valley. The red talons flinched, outnumbered beyond any chance. Not just outnumbered, facing men who didn't fear violence, didn't fear prison, didn't fear dying if it meant keeping their word. Jackson delivered the final line like a steel period. "Leave, now, or we make you remember for the rest of your lives that touching someone who stands with Hell's Angels was your last mistake." The red talons looked at each other. One tightened his grip, thinking about trying his luck, but 80-plus stares froze him solid. The leader finally spat on the ground, an act he thought was defiance but only showed defeat. "Move," he growled. "All of you," like beasts driven from a cave by torches. The red talons backed away step by step, then scrambled into their trucks. Pickup engines screamed. Tires spun red dust, and they vanished into the trees like jackals chased from land that was never theirs. When the last truck disappeared, every Harley throttled down in perfect sync, then shut off, but the echo still hung in the air like the heartbeat of a steel army. Cole turned to Ayanna. She stood there, shoulders trembling slightly but eyes blazing, staring at over 80 bikers like she was seeing something she hadn't dared believe existed for 6 months. A force on her side that demanded neither ownership nor obedience, just protection. Jackson walked over, placed a hand on Cole's shoulder. "We came as fast as we could," he said. "You're never alone, Cole." Cole nodded. Something warm spread through his chest. Ayanna looked at Jackson, then Cole, then the river of Harley headlights stretching like a steel galaxy. And she understood not just with her mind, but with the survival instinct honed her whole life. From this moment on, she no longer ran alone. A Vegas brother bellowed like thunder. "She rides with us now." A Phoenix brother added, "Touch her, you touch all of us." Ayanna drew a long breath, like someone surfacing from deep water and feeling full lungs for the first time in months. She didn't say thank you, didn't cry, didn't collapse into anyone. She just stood in the circle of Harleys, under the lights and hot exhaust, and let herself feel what she had lost too long ago, the feeling of belonging, not as property, but as a person chosen, protected, seen. Ayanna Nez, the hunted warrior, from that second forward, stood officially under the wings of the Hells Angels. After the red talons melted into the forest and the Harleys from Phoenix, Tucson, and Vegas shut down, silence returned, leaving the cabin wrapped in a strange stillness. Ayanna stood in the yard watching the red dust still hanging in the air, as if the world had just shifted one more notch and she hadn't caught up yet. She touched her chest where her heart still pounded, not from running, not from fighting, but because for the first time she had seen a force stand with her, without demanding she trade her freedom or her soul. That night the cabin was quiet like a wound freshly bandaged. Cole swept broken glass in the living room, rehung the kicked-in door, but every few minutes he glanced outside to see if she was still there. But Ayanna didn't vanish into the dark like before. She stood on the porch watching moonlight shimmer on the sand, and finally turned to Cole with words soft as breath but strong enough to change his heartbeat. "If I leave, you'll be alone again." Cole wanted to say he could handle it, but he knew that would be the worst lie of his life, so he just gave a small shake of his head. "No," he said. "Not this time." And so Ayanna stayed. She started by sleeping on the old living room couch, even though Cole insisted she take his bedroom. She just narrowed her eyes and said, "I've slept on cold ground under hail. This couch is a 5-star hotel." And Cole couldn't argue. The first morning living together, he woke to the steady clang of metal out front. When he stepped outside, Ayanna had the Harley up on the stand, her muscled arms flying, pulling plugs, cleaning cylinders like she'd done it her whole life. She didn't look up, just said, "You routed the breather hose wrong." Cole blinked. "What?" "Night before last," she said. "When I was by the garage door. I saw it. It'll puke oil on a long run." Cole walked over and watched her reroute the hose, tighten clamps, fix every detail. She worked faster than he did, fast enough that he hooked thumbs in his belt and let out. "You know Harleys?" Ayanna looked up, black eyes flashing something close to pride. "My father was the last Apache around here who built his own bikes. I started at 13. From that day on, Cole's garage was no longer the territory of a solitary man. It became a place where two people worked side by side, fixed bikes, argued over oil brands and torque specs, and quietly, Cole started saving the hard jobs for her. Not because he wanted a break, but because he loved watching her work, loved her focus, loved the way she bent over an engine, like she was performing an ancient rite. When the sun dropped behind the horizon, they did something neither had ever done with anyone else, ride two up through the canyons. Wind whipped their hair, hot Arizona air slapped their faces like a reminder they were alive, running, free. Ayanna rode Cole's softail like she was born to it, solid, powerful, fearless, leaning into curves along cliff edges. One evening, after blasting through the twists of Salt River Canyon, Cole asked, "You're not scared of speed?" Ayanna glanced over through the wind, eyes narrowing like she was deciding if the question deserved an answer. "I'm scared of standing still," she said. Standing still gets you caught. Those simple words, spoken against a sky burning red as the sun died behind the mountains, let Cole see another piece of her soul, a piece only he was allowed to see. Evenings they cooked together, though the results were usually chaotic. Cole burned eggs, Ayanna oversalted the meat, and they ended up eating sandwiches or canned chili. But every time, between small laughs and light teasing, the cabin slowly became home in a way Cole hadn't thought possible since losing Ryder. Some nights were so hot they dragged blankets to the bed of the old pickup, climbed in and lay watching the stars. Ayanna lay on her side, hand under her head, eyes fixed on the sky without blinking. Cole lay beside her, listening quietly as she told stories of patrols, of her father, of the girls she'd helped escape the Red Talons. She told them without shaking, without tears. But every story carried cuts she had borne alone. One night when high desert winds swept the plateau, Cole said, "You can leave any time, go anywhere you want. You don't owe me anything." Aliana didn't turn. "I know." Cole went quiet. After a moment she added, softer than he had ever heard her, "But I'm staying because I want to stay." That one sentence was enough to chase away the insecurity he'd carried for nights. They never labeled what they were, never said we're this or we're that. No status change. They just lived side by side, sharing meals, sharing breath on cold nights, sharing the steady thump of engines every morning. And in that simple rhythm, two souls that had been shattered, ground sharp and cold by life, that had thought they only knew how to live on pain and running, began to find the pieces they thought were lost forever. Trust, peace, and the thing they didn't dare name, hope. Some mornings Cole woke early to work on the Sportster and found Ayana on the porch watching the sunrise. First light swept across her face, highlighting the fading bruise. Cole stepped out and stood beside her without speaking. Ayana said softly, "I thought I'd never again get to stand still and watch the sun come up." "Why?" "Because for 6 months, I didn't think I'd live long enough to see it." Cole didn't take her hand, didn't hug her, he just stood beside her. That was enough. Ayana glanced at him, the corner of her mouth lifting like a breath. "But now it's different." "Different how?" she asked. Ayana looked straight into his eyes, and her words blew apart the last pieces of the wall Cole had built around himself. "Now I don't live alone," and Cole knew they had found themselves in each other. No one tried to own anyone, no one tried to change anyone. They just walked together at each other's speed, breathing the same air. A warrior and a biker, two torn mountain-hard souls finally finding a place to lean. 3 months after the night, the Red Talons were driven from the cabin. When the desert began wearing its late-day gold and wind from Tonto National Forest carried the chill of coming dusk, Cole and Ayana stood in front of the garage watching the dirt road stretch into the trees like a promise made real. Far off, engines began to growl, familiar, but this time carrying no tension like past confrontations. They sounded like family calling. Then red dust pillars rose on the road. One by one, riders, headlights, Harleys emerged from the shadows like sparks leaving darkness. Phoenix chapter led. Tucson followed. Vegas brought up the rear. Not 80 this time. Over 120 Harleys turned the approach to the cabin red, engines blending into one rolling thunder that pounded the ground and vibrated into the bones of anyone within half a mile. Ayana watched the sight, black eyes reflecting blazing headlights, no longer hiding emotion or pretending she hadn't once believed she belonged nowhere. "I thought I lost my tribe," she said, voice low but sharp as wires stretched between hills. "I thought I'd live forever on the edge, alone like a bird that left the flock." She turned to Cole. Last sunlight painted his hard, once lonely features orange, but it turns out I was just looking in the wrong place. Cole felt those words hit like hooves across his heart, strong, real, undeniable. He stepped close, took her hand without asking permission anymore. "Here," he said, eyes never leaving hers. "With them, we start over." A gun at their intertwined fingers, then up at the arc of Harleys in front of them. Over 120 bikes, each one a story of freedom, pain, souls who once had no place, now formed a shield solid as mountain stone. And Agana knew Cole was right. She hadn't lost her tribe. She had just found a new one, not bound by blood, not by birthright, but by choice. The kind of strength she had traded 6 months of running to keep. Jackson Ironhorse. Vale nodded from the front of the pack. "Ready?" he asked, voice rolling like fire through a canyon. Cole nodded. Agana nodded. They climbed onto the soft tail. Cole at the bars, Agana behind, arms around his waist. Dusk wind hit their faces. Sage, red dust, pine resin, and the scent of a future neither had owned before. When Cole fired it up, his Harley joined the chorus, rumbling like ancient drums, like the desert song, like a declaration they were no longer swallowed by the past. The whole pack lit up, over 120 headlights blazing like fire eyes. Cole glanced back at Agana one last time before rolling forward to join the line. She met his eyes, black as hot steel. "Freedom really does have a sound." Cole smiled. "And it's louder than I remembered." Jackson raised a hand. The pack moved. A long river of steel rolled away from the cabin, through the trees, across the dirt, straight onto the highway like a glowing engine river under the dying sun. When Cole's tires hit asphalt, Aghanim rested her forehead against his back and whispered through wind and thunder, "Thank you for finding me." Cole twisted the throttle, voice lost in the roar. "No, we found each other." And they shot down the open highway, 2 columns of Harleys stretching behind like an escort of freedom. No one rode faster than anyone else. No one left anyone behind. The sound of engines rolled across the desert like a song of the reborn, people who had fallen but stood again on their own feet, hearts and each other's loyalty. That was the sound of choice, of chosen family, of love that asked no permission and was defined by no tribe or violence. That was the sound of engines leaving the desert, the sound of freedom, the sound of a new beginning. And Cole knew, Aghanim knew, and every biker riding escort knew. From this day forward, they were no longer running away. They were riding toward their lives. If you love emotional dust-covered stories like this, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. And remember to like plus comment so the algorithm knows you want more tales about bikers and freedom.